Hello everyone and welcome to the house. Today is the 18th of April and we are into the second day of this year's Festival of Unleavened Bread, which lasts until the 20th of April. We have been commemorating this time together by sharing a 3-part Passover story mini-series. And today we'll be looking at the second of these stories. And then tomorrow, on Sabbath, we will be exploring the third and final story. Today is a day which some call Good Friday, or the day on which we remember Jesus' crucifixion. We hope that as we journey through this remembrance together, that the truth and meaning of these events will rise up to meet us in new and profound ways. We will share this meditation through prayer, music, and story. In case you're new here and don't know what's going on, my name is Natalie Kendel. I'm a pastor and theologian here at the house, and I will be your host for today. You've joined us on the official YouTube channel of the house. The house is an online house church where we share Bible stories, Bible studies, music, prayer, social justice, and celebrate Shabbat together. Usually we meet together on Sabbath or on Saturdays, but as we mentioned, we've come together this Friday evening as it is a special event. To begin, I'd like to read an excerpt from Jeremiah chapter 12. In this chapter, Jeremiah, a prophet, expresses a lament and a complaint to God. And this is what he says. You are always righteous, Lord, when I bring a case before you, yet I would speak with you about your justice. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why do all the faithless live at ease? You have planted them, and they have taken root. They grow and bear fruit. You are always on their lips, but far from their hearts. Yet you know me, Lord. You see me and test my thoughts about you. Drag them off like sheep to be butchered. Set them apart for the day of slaughter. How long will the land lie parched, and the grass in every field be withered? Because those who live in it are wicked, and the animals and birds have perished. Moreover, the people are saying, He will not see what happens to us. Let's sing together, The Lament is Sacred. The lament is sacred and we give it space. The lament is sacred and we give it space. Hear us, O Lord, hear our lament, O God. Grief is valid and we give it room. The grief is valid and we give it room. Hear us, O Lord, hear our grief, O God. The rage is holy and we let it burn. The rage is holy and we let it burn. Hear us, O Lord, rage as we rage, O God. For you are grieving and you too lament. For you are raging and you too lament. Rise up, O Lord, rise up, O Lord, O God. Rise up, O Lord, rise up, O Lord, O God, O Jesus, we together ask you now that you will meet us in our confusion, in our disillusionment, our rage and our grief. But not only to sit with it, but to also, as we sang, rise up. We know that you will very soon rise up and put an end to the injustice here. Rise up and respond quickly, Lord, for the injustice is great and your children are suffering. Please gift us with the Holy Spirit, the Spirit that you described as being a comforter. May he comfort us. Speak to us words of encouragement and clarity and comfort this evening. Amen. Sometimes here at the house, we share examples of people who in everyday ways are being image bearers, carrying the image of God, the light of God, the love of God into the world. And today's example is of a woman called Ruth Coker Burks. In the late 1980s, during the height of the AIDS epidemic in the US, Ruth Coker Burks, a young single mother in Arkansas, became an unexpected hero known as the Cemetery Angel. This was during a time when much less was known about HIV or about AIDS, how it was contracted, how the disease developed. And in society, those who were sick were truly treated as lepers. People avoided them, didn't want to touch them. Doctors and nurses left AIDS patients to die alone and untreated in their hospital beds. The hospital hallway floors were lined with trays of uneaten food because nurses refused to enter the rooms of patients for fear of the disease. Victims faced stigma, desertion, and utter desolation. And many so-called Christians blamed the epidemic on some sort of curse or punishment from God, saying that these patients had brought it on themselves, that they had earned this illness through their sin, and called down condemnation on these dying people. Suffice to say, AIDS patients were ostracized to the extreme. They were mistreated, tainted by taboo, dehumanized, and left alone to suffer. Not only that, but a majority of churches and graveyards refused to give burial plots to AIDS patients who died, denying them memory or dignity even at the end. But not so with Ruth Coker Burks. With little support from medical community or society, she stepped into care for dying AIDS patients, most of whom had been abandoned by their families due to fear and stigma. When funeral homes refused to handle their bodies, she took it upon herself to bury over 40 of them in her own family's cemetery, ensuring they received dignity in death. Using her modest salary from a real estate job, Ruth provided medicine, food, and emotional support for these men, often acting as their nurse, their advocate, and their final companion. And she paid a heavy price for it, facing ridicule and judgment from others. But despite facing judgment and isolation, she offered unwavering compassion at a time when many turned their backs. Ruth's courage and kindness made her a symbol of humanity and love amid a devastating crisis. What a beautiful person and a beautiful story to keep in mind as we think of the mistreatment, the abandonment, the death, and the burial of Jesus. How he was treated, how he was rejected, how he was called cursed by God, how he was buried. Ruth Coker Burks shone a light in the world and truly reflected the love and the face of God to those around her. Let us be inspired by her example. We'll now sing together a song called The Reminding, and then we'll jump straight into our story for this evening. We come to you, O Lord, so easily distracted, so focused on ourselves and our hearts lukewarm at best. Vanity be silent and pride be put aside. Come now, be reacquainted with him who humbly leads. The servant who would bow to serve even the lowest, now who will come and follow his message and his way. Lay aside your hunger for power, status, praise, and let the servant king change your hearts and minds today. Remind us once again of the true and better way. Our story today is found in John chapter 11. We explore this story in parallel with this year's Easter or Passover, and the events which took place one particular Passover during Jesus' 33rd year of living and walking among us as a human on earth. This is the second story in this year's three-part mini Passover series, in which we've been looking at some of the events leading up to the death and resurrection of Jesus the Messiah. Last time we looked at the story Jesus Wept, in which Jesus resurrects his friend Lazarus in the week before his own death. Well, today is a sort of continuation of that storyline. In fact, it's found in the very same chapter as the story of Lazarus' resurrection. It comes right after that event. So, let's rejoin the story and see where it takes us. John 11, from verse 43. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So our story today comes at the back end of the Lazarus resurrection. It is part of the story, sort of flowing from one event into another. This is the reaction, the response of the crowd. And in response to seeing Jesus raising a man from the dead, the witnesses standing around watching this miracle have one of two responses. One is either, verse 45, they believed in him. Meanwhile, the other response was, verse 46, but some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Some, at seeing that Jesus has the power to resurrect the dead, are moved to believe that Jesus is the Son of God, the Messiah, the King and Deliverer which God had promised to send to rescue his people. Some, however, tell on Jesus to his enemies. When this group informs the Pharisees of what's happened, it isn't just to spread gossip, and they aren't telling the Pharisees out of a place of awe, amazement, or spreading good news. The Pharisees, as we know, was the name of a group of Jewish religious leaders at the time of Jesus. They were elders, spiritual leaders, and a body of religious authority. And it was well known among the Jewish people in Judea that most of the Pharisees abhorred Jesus. They had spent their time, energy, and attention these past 3 years of Jesus' public ministry, challenging him, attacking him in public, calling him demon-possessed and a traitor and a heretic, denouncing, condemning, attempting to trap and entrap Jesus in every way they could. But why hadn't they gone and outright arrested Jesus yet? Why had they not, as they had done with so many others before, sent out the temple guards to forcibly arrest the man whom they considered a corrupter of the people, a false prophet, a false guide, and thrown him into the prisons they owned? Well, the answer to that question is repeated again and again throughout all 4 of the Gospels. They were afraid of the people. The Pharisees and the other religious leaders were afraid of the people's reaction if they were to capture or in any way harm Jesus, as exemplified in Matthew 21, 45 to 46. It says, they wanted to arrest him, but they were afraid of the people because the people believed that Jesus was a prophet. So as we said, it was well known that the Pharisees hated and had ill intent toward Jesus. And so when part of the crowd who witnessed the resurrection of Lazarus go and tell the Pharisees about what's happened, you can know that their intentions were ill intent as well. They are feeding information they view as somehow damning, about Jesus to Jesus' enemies. They are telling on Jesus to his attackers to fuel their case against him, the case that he is a false messenger, a threat to the people, a wayward heretic. So that is how the story of Lazarus continues, with this polar opposite reactions to Jesus' actions. This seems to be the effect Jesus has on all people. It is as though his very being, his very person, elicits a dramatic and stark response, one way or the other. Either worship or attack. People either love him or hate him. As though the absolute goodness of who he is won't permit room for a neutral response. Well, what happens after these reports come back to the Pharisees? Some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. In response to hearing that Jesus has raised a dead man to life, the chief priests of the temple in Jerusalem and the Pharisees call a meeting, specifically a meeting of the Sanhedrin. Now, this isn't just any old meeting or gathering. The Sanhedrin refers to a legislative and judicial assembly of the Jewish religious leaders. This is a judging body, similar to a supreme council or a court of justice. Its members made up of the religious elites, members of the high priestly family, scribes who were religious experts on scripture, lay elders highly esteemed in the Jewish community, the highest-ranking priests who serve in the temple. The term Sanhedrin comes from the Greek word synedrion, meaning council or sitting together. And this council served as the supreme religious body in Judea during Jesus' day, with the power to enact religious, civil, and criminal jurisdiction. So,
Suffice to say that the Pharisees don't have a mild reaction to the news they hear. They don't merely shake their heads or grumble or gossip among themselves. They are taking action. They call a meeting of the Sanhedrin. This needs to be talked about. Jesus has raised someone from the dead. This demands immediate discussion and action. Now, what happens in this meeting? What are we accomplishing? They asked. Here the English translation is accomplishing. The original Greek word, however, is poieumen, from poieo, meaning to make, to do, to act, to cause, to work. So the first recorded thing said at this meeting is, "What are we doing?" Continuing verse 47. Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. So, what are we doing, or what are we going to do about this man performing many signs? Now, why on earth would anyone be upset about what a man is doing if what he is doing is turning back death itself and resurrecting the dead, giving them life? If a man is doing that, why do you, the Sanhedrin, have to do anything about that? How could this possibly be a problem you have to fix? Well, they answer that question for us. The first part is, if we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. The Pharisees know that if Jesus keeps doing what he's doing, then more and more people will trust in that he is who he says he is. As he performs miracles, the evidence will be so undeniable, the pull to him so irresistible, that they're concerned everyone will end up believing in him. And here comes the second part of their concern. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. Here the real concern reveals itself. The quiet part is spoken out loud. What the religious leaders are actually saying is, if we allow Jesus to keep doing what he's doing, we will lose our power. We, the Sanhedrin, the religious elite, the spiritual leaders of the people, will lose our positions, our seat of power, both the spiritual seat of power, namely the temple, and our political seat of power as a nation. The Sanhedrin worry that if Jesus continues to draw so much attention, he will draw negative attention onto the Jewish people, and there will be retribution from their Roman imperial occupiers. Now the question should at this point arise in our minds. Why, Sanhedrin? Why, Jewish religious leaders, are you so eager to please, so eager to fall in line, so eager to stay on the good side of your oppressors? Why are the religious leaders so concerned about placating and playing nice with the Roman Empire, who is currently crushing, oppressing, controlling, stealing from, slaughtering, extorting, tyrannizing, persecuting, maltreating their own people? These are the Romans who bleed the people dry with high taxation and land theft. These are the Romans who lined the hills and roads around Jerusalem with a sea of wooden crosses, thousands upon thousands of Jewish people nailed to them, tortured, dying for having in any way resisted or spoken out against the Roman Empire and its occupation of Judea. Left hanging there as a multitude of corpses to warn anyone against even thinking about resisting absolute submission to Rome. Why would the religious leaders be more concerned with keeping things as they are, with appeasing their own people's oppressors, with keeping intact the prison they're in, than with allowing a man to raise the dead to life? Well, it's all about power. Their power. Protecting and maintaining the status quo is all about power, honor, titles, and the positions of the religious leaders. This is the thing they will fight tooth and nail to protect and maintain. This is the thing they are willing to murder for in order to protect and maintain. And the fact that they would rather have the Romans rule over Judea than Jesus raising the dead back to life, than Jesus threatening the power of the religious leaders, tells us that the Pharisees, the priests, the scribes, and the other religious leaders had intertwined their power with the power of Rome, married it to the Roman imperial power. If the Pharisees had founded their power and position on life, on what is right, on justice, on healing their people, then Jesus bringing life, what is right, justice, and healing people wouldn't be a threat to them. Jesus wouldn't be a threat to them if they were already invested in the people's well-being and healing and liberation, and they would rejoice at his signs and wonders and actions. But they had bound the power they loved so much to the oppressive occupation and the imperial rule of Rome, not to the rule of God. And if that relationship with imperial Rome were to be rocked or damaged, their power would be as well. And there was nothing they loved more than their power. So much so that they would rather please and praise and serve their oppressors, their occupiers, than let Jesus live. What are we accomplishing? What are we doing? They asked. Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. The religious leaders care more about their place of worship than the actual people who flow in and out of it every day. They care more about the temple service than the God they're praying to. They care more about a building than human beings, and more about national identity and power than the actual people of that nation. The meeting continues, verse 49. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up. You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation perish. A man named Caiaphas interrupts the noise of complaints and mumblings filling the meeting hall of the Sanhedrin that day. He is the chairman of that meeting. As high priest, he is the highest ranked in the room, the leader of these leaders. And he says, You really don't get just how serious this is, do you? Don't you get it? Why are you asking, what are we doing? What needs to be done? We know what needs to be done. It is perfectly clear what needs to be done. Jesus doesn't just need to be stopped. We don't just need to stop what he's doing. Jesus cannot be allowed to continue living. Jesus must die. That's the level of threat we're dealing with. You do not realize that it is better for you. It is better for all you priests, scribes, Pharisees, all you religious leaders. It is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. Note, it isn't It's better for the people. It's better for the Jewish people, the men, women, and children whom Jesus is healing and helping and raising back to life and giving hope and feeding. No, it is better for you, the religious leaders, the elite, the privileged, that Jesus should die, than that our national identity, our power, should perish. Now, no doubt, Caiaphas thought he was acting very independently and shrewdly by saying these words that day. But unknown to the high priest, out of his mouth is spilling a prophecy that he does not understand, a prophecy spoken hundreds of years before he was even born, before he even stepped foot into the Sanhedrin meeting that day. Verse 45, he, that is Caiaphas, did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. Here is the power of God, that even as his enemies are plotting his murder, their words are turned against them and speak not of their plans, though they think it's their plans, but of God's awesome and astonishing plan, namely to reveal who he is and his heart for everyone to see, to show clearly the depth of the commitment he has to come close to human beings, to save, to heal, restore, to offer forgiveness, and a better way to a self-destructive human race. Yes, even to the very people who are going to kill, betray, and reject him. Even as the mouth of Caiaphas speaks to defend their power, the words of God hijack those plans and turns them into something else. Caiaphas thinks that maintaining the status quo is worth the price of one life, one man. God seems to think that interrupting the status quo is worth the price of the most important and costly life in the universe. While the words of Caiaphas seem to have focused the upset and tumultuous Sanhedrin, he has crystallized their way forward, what they think needs to be done to secure their own power. The plan is now clear. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. The pieces on the chessboard are taking their places. Hearts and motives and true intentions are stepping into the light. Therefore, Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and as they stood in the temple courts, they asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all?" But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so that they might arrest him. In January 2024, I spent some time writing to pastors and various spiritual leaders that I know. Pastors from my country of birth, Norway, pastors I attended seminary with, and in my correspondence I personally urged them to pay attention to what is happening in Gaza concentration camp, and to use their platform, their influence, and their voice to speak up for Palestine, to call for the liberation of the Palestinians, and condemn the brutal occupation and slaughter being committed by the European Zionist colonial project called Israel. One such person which I reached out to is a Norwegian Adventist pastor named Harold. Harold is a middle-aged man, a seasoned pastor and author, who in addition to being a pastor is also the assistant department leader for SABU, the Seventh-day Adventist Church's Children and Youth Society, whose goal is to encourage and disciple teens and youth to follow Jesus and to live in accordance with the Seventh-day Adventist faith and doctrine. Now, I had met Harold on several occasions, had face-to-face and online interactions with him. I had even recommended one of his published books here on the House's channel, an excellent challenge to theologically rethink the way the narrative of the cross is told. I considered Harold to be unusually thoughtful and theologically insightful, and I hope deeply that he would respond openly and with a willing heart to my challenge. On the 12th of April, I wrote Harold on Facebook Messenger. "Hi Harold, I'm wondering why you haven't posted anything about Gaza and the Palestinian genocide." He responded, "Good question. What do you imagine I would achieve by writing about it?" I responded by asking whether or not his question was a sincere one, or merely whether he was answering with a sarcastic tone. I ask this because if he was wondering sincerely, I would be willing to invest my time and energy in explaining why it is so important that he speaks up. But if he wasn't sincere, I didn't wish to, as I had fallen into the trap of doing with so many others, waste that precious time and energy I could have been using on activism and advocacy on someone not willing to listen. He assured me his question was sincere, responding, "No, it was meant sincerely. Norway is so polarized over this issue, I have the feeling nobody is listening anymore. That said, I cannot see how anyone can support Israel in this. If people are not convinced by watching the news that this is wrong, I don't see how anything I say can change anything." Despite him being wrong about his assumption that speaking up would be pointless, I saw a glimmer of hope in that Harold knew Israel is wrong. And so I gladly put together a few bullet points on why his voice and influence do matter, such as how every voice matters, and the point isn't that we speak up for the Palestinians because we are guaranteed success, but because it is the right thing to do. And as spiritual leaders, that is our responsibility, to do the right thing and to lead by example. Harold thanked me for my 11-point explanation and called it certainly compelling. He even said it was a shame that he would be the only one to read it, and then he left it there. I followed up on the 20th of January, after Harold had still remained completely silent about the topic. I repeated my question, "Why have you stayed silent about the Palestinian genocide?" Now, some may think me impertinent, wondering why I'd think it's my duty or even my right to challenge someone so directly. My reply to that would be, as a fellow pastor and theologian, as well as having grown up in the Norwegian SDA Church, I have every right to challenge my spiritual leaders to act with integrity, and my colleagues to do the right thing. If I do not have every right to hold a pastor and spiritual leader like Harold responsible to be an accountability sharer, then who does? So I asked my question a second time, since it was still unanswered, and Harold replied like so. "As I told you, I didn't think my writing about it would accomplish anything but further polarization. I've seen other friends try. Also a sense of the same powerlessness I feel when it comes to the Russian-Ukrainian war. I am reconsidering, however. Also my friend, redacted name, is posting very thoughtfully and constructively." So to sum up, despite Harold reading my points about how polarization is not the greatest evil in the world and is sometimes necessary when making value-based decisions, he still maintained that he hadn't engaged because of the polarizing effect this topic has in the Norwegian church. A man who clearly knows that he is not powerless by the mere fact that he speaks on other matters, preaches behind the pulpit, writes books, publishes works, and is a pastor and leader of young people. If he believed that his voice and influence doesn't matter, and that he is indeed powerless, he wouldn't engage in any of these things. But he clearly knows deep down that his voice does matter, as does his influence. No, he would rather let others post about this issue, like his friend with the redacted name, or myself. But he'll indulge his own feelings of powerlessness, despite being a white, straight, middle-aged Scandinavian man, which makes him one of the most powerful and privileged people on the planet. He has not posted or spoken up for the Palestinians on social media platforms, despite writing that he's reconsidering. And to this day he's remained silent and stayed out of the fight. In fact, the only time he has commented on any of my online posts was when I shared a link to the Norwegian Union's article about the so-called Israel versus Palestine conflict and war. I attacked the article for forwarding Zionist language and propaganda, for example by calling it a war or a conflict, and the contents of the article being deeply misleading and even sharing false historical information, lies at times. Harold commented that he felt the article was very well balanced. After months of him being silent, that was what he had to say. And it tears at my heart to say that my engagement with Harold is not unique. I have had disturbingly similar conversations with other pastors and spiritual leaders I know, and it's the same excuses and the same misguided notions again and again and again, with the same themes emerging with eerie resemblance to each other. The common themes? This topic is polarizing. This issue is divisive. This topic is causing people to fight with each other. This topic is causing a disruption to the peace, a disruption to the running of the church, a disruption to our services and programs, a disruption to the status quo. It's divisive. It disturbs our unity. We want everyone to get along. We want things to continue as normal, continue as usual. We don't want to upset. We don't want arguments and rifts in relationships. Better for one people to die than the unity of a whole church to perish. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about how the religious leaders of Jesus' day, when debating if they should hand him over to be executed by the Roman occupation, made that argument. Better for one man to die than a nation to perish. It is one of the oldest arguments for sacrificing what is right for the sake of national security, a sacrifice we have all in the 21st century West come to be so familiar with in the rhetoric of post-9/11, in the propaganda of the American empire, in the reasoning behind the anti-immigration, anti-refugee policies our politicians in our individual countries spout. The argument in John 11 was that Jesus threatened national security. He threatened the place of worship. He threatened the organizational structure of their religious system. He seemed to threaten the very unity of the people. See how they are polarized by Jesus? Some believe, others condemn him. He brings disunity. He brings arguing, fighting, ugly disagreement. He brings upset, a disturbance to the peace. Imagine having the audacity to call that peace. Your country, your land, your people invaded, occupied, tyrannized, suffering, and you call that peace? Imagine calling what we have in our churches today peace or unity. How can there be peace when hundreds of thousands of people are being systematically annihilated? Their pregnant women driven over by tanks for fun until their babies are exploded from their wombs. Their medical staff forced to leave hospital beds at gunpoint so that the premature infants are unplugged from their life support machines and left to die, literally screaming, rotting in their beds, completely alone. Their toddlers being shot in the head by gleeful snipers who play games each day of how many children they can shoot. Their men gruesomely starved and held in torture camps where they are raped to death by their Israeli captors. All of this filmed and broadcasted on television. How can there be peace? How can you claim there is peace to be protected here when it is our money, our governments, our tax dollars paying directly for the bombs being dropped on tents? It is our seats of power that are doing this. Our silence makes us complicit. Any inactivity is our approval. But no, let us not have church members arguing. Let us not lead by example and educate ourselves and our congregations about what's really happening. If this is the unity you are trying to protect, this is not a unity worth protecting. It is not a unity at all, it is a uniformity. And the two are not the same. If you have a unity held together by a complicity in the murder of children, your unity is the unity of hell, and you have no place in God's will or the kingdom of Jesus. Jesus presented and upset by his very existence, and the religious leaders of his day would rather maintain the status quo with their oppressors and occupiers, no less, than have Jesus stay alive. And I think of the parallels between their attitude and that of so many pastors today, so many religious leaders today. The pastors who say, I won't speak up for Palestine in my church because it's divisive and it'll cause disunity. From the least to the greatest, all are greedy for gain, prophets and priests alike. All practice deceit. They dress the wound of my people as though it were not serious. Peace, peace, they say, when there is no peace. Are they ashamed of their detestable conduct? No, they have no shame at all. They do not even know how to blush. So they will fall among the fallen. They will be brought down when I punish them, says the Lord. Like the Pharisees, all of these Western pastors and spiritual leaders, too, are willing to sacrifice truth and justice and the lives of thousands for the sake of keeping up the niceties toward their oppressors and the hellish delusion of peace and unity which they claim exists but doesn't exist at all. All the while, these pastors don't realize that if the status quo in any faith community is an acceptance or apathy about a genocide or Zionist propaganda, which is the propaganda of colonialism, racism, and white supremacy, then that's a status quo that needs upsetting. needs interrupting and dramatic repentance. And if the unity in our churches is disturbed by our speaking up against the genocide, then that should be the biggest alarm bell for us. Such unity is held together by blood. Such peace is built on murder. Just like the peace the Sanhedrin were trying to maintain demanded murder. Because what does that tell us about what we've built our communities on? Not what we say we've built it on, but what it's actually built on. Not love, but the love of power. The love of the status quo, of imperialism, racism, white colonialism, wealth, power, a fierce protection of our privileges, and a disdain for the truth. Oh, Jesus, save us from such evil and cowardly leaders. What all these pastors who are staying silent about the Palestinian genocide are actually saying is, better for one people to die than my church's illusion of unity to perish. Or perhaps, if we were to peel back the mask and see the real reason behind the excuses made by pastors like Harold and many others, we'd actually hear something more like this. Better for one people to die than for my popularity to perish. Better for one people to die than for my position and title within the church to be revoked or challenged. Better for one people to die than for me to have to deal with the discomfort of conflict. Better for one people to die than for me to lose all my friends. Better for one people to die than for me to feel the discomfort of being in the minority and speaking against those who will condemn and judge me. Better for one people to die than for people to not like me. Better for one people to die than for me to have to admit that I've been wrong all my life, and I have to do a 180-degree turn and unlearn so many things I've been taught about myself, my country, my church, historical and military history, my privilege. Better for one people to die than for me to choose courage and do things scared, rather than wallow in my own feelings of helplessness, centering myself and my feelings and making it all about me, and wringing my hands as though I can do nothing. Better for one people to die than for the lies that hold our church denomination together to be revealed for the poison and the injustice and oppression which they actually are. Better for one people to die than for me to repent of my sins. The majority of the West has cast their vote. They too have come together and had a meeting, and decided that it is better for the Palestinians to die than for their power to be dismantled. This is the mathematics of empire. This is the calculation of this world's kingdom. And the lives of the Palestinians have been weighed by us and found to be nothing compared to the weight of our love of power and comfort. And I know that there will be a reckoning. And each one of us will be called to answer for what we voted, what we did, and what we did not do for the Palestinians, for the oppressed, for God's children. They will be our judges, and we will be made to answer to that man who died for a nation already perished, he who is willing to come close enough to heal us. There is still time. The question is, what are you going to choose? Who are you going to be in this story? How are you going to value and weigh even a single Palestinian life? What cross is Jesus asking you to pick up and follow him? The cross of leaving behind your dream of holding a certain office in the church administration? The cross of leaving behind friendships with people who are genocide enablers and deniers? Is your cross perhaps to face your deep fear of conflict and stopping people-pleasing and letting go of the need to be liked? What is the cross you are being asked to bear together with your Lord? I leave you today with the words of Jesus recorded in Matthew 16. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done. It would be better for you to lose your power and comfort than for the Palestinian people to perish.
Let us pray together. Jesus, please bring hope to our hearts today. It looks as though evil and oppression is winning. It's looked that way for a long time. Many of us are tired. There are those listening and watching today who carry in their minds and in their bodies the injustice they have experienced, their ancestors have experienced, the injustice they've witnessed others go through. We are tired, and sometimes we can feel so small and helpless and exhausted. But you know well what it feels like to face empire. You, like so many of us, were killed by empire, by the love some have for power and violence and comfort. But you proved that you have the final say. You have the power over death. You who rose from the dead. You will have the final word. And death will be the final enemy you defeat. We turn our minds now to our brothers and sisters in Palestine, those who are holding the bodies of their dead children, those who are being starved to death, who are being tortured in the Israeli torture camps, who are being slaughtered in Gaza concentration camp. God, with one voice we now pray, put an end to it. Come and quickly bring your wrath, your deliverance, your justice. Break the weapons and the power of the Israelis and all who back, support, or enable them. Save your children, Lord. Do not delay. And may we, until you have your final say, do what is right. Without hesitation, without wavering, let us be brave and firm and just by standing with and speaking up for the Palestinians and the other oppressed people around us. Let the Palestinians feel the community of support and solidarity from your people all over the world. And though we can't physically be there with them right now, unite us in spirit, and may your strength and peace hold them just a little longer. For we know that you're coming very soon, and with you is also coming justice. And until then, we too, as Jeremiah asked, we ask, why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why do they succeed? And you reply, not for long. Let anyone here today who's experiencing injustice, oppression, or suffering, let them now receive your peace. Let the Jesus who chose a cross over abandonment of human beings be a beacon of light to us in the darkness. Let them receive your assurance and promise that you are coming for them. You will be their lawyer, you will uphold their case, you will be their champion, their witness, and you will put an end to their oppressors. You will be their judge and give them justice. And it will be good and right. You are the God of resurrection. You will mend every broken thing, restore every stolen thing, in such profoundly all-encompassing ways that we can't even imagine it right now. And as we wait, feed our souls today with your wisdom, your kindness, your reassurance, and your resurrection life. Thank you, Lord Jesus. Amen. Thank you so much for joining us this evening at the house for this Good Friday special. You're very welcome to explore our other stories, our studies, and our podcast here on the channel. And as we part ways this evening, and as we enter into Shabbat together, let us sing a song called Trouble, in celebration of the Jesus who was willing to be in trouble, who is willing to have trouble. Jesus said to his followers in John 16, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. All you who are crushed, trying to do what's right while constantly mistreated, and you who are tired of getting up each time you've been knocked down. If you follow Jesus Christ, you'll have trouble just like those who've gone before you. But take heart,
that's right. You'll have trouble, but the victory is yours. If you follow Christ, walk the footsteps of a king who came to serve us, you'll know Jesus' joy, and you'll also know the struggle of his cross. If you follow Jesus Christ, you'll have trouble just like those who've gone before you. But take heart, the dawn is nigh. You'll have trouble, but the victory is yours. As it is, it's always been. When light meets dark, there will be trouble. All you who seek, make some trouble, rock the boat by choosing love.